I have 4 o'clock.
Yes. If we're ready, we'll call to order. Welcome to the December 17th, 2020 meeting of the Humboldt County Association of Governments Board. In accordance with Executive Order N29-20, the Humboldt County Association of Government meetings will be held virtually until further notice. If you have public comment you'd like to make, please call 669-900-6833 and enter meeting ID 857-6388-0580 and press *9 on your phone, and this will raise your hand. You'll continue to hear the meeting while you're on the call, and when it is time for public comment on the item you wish to speak, the clerk will unmute your phone and you will hear a prompt that indicates your phone is unmuted. Please state your name and begin your comment, and you will have 3 minutes. And at this time, before we do the roll call, I have a message that Estelle would like read into the meeting record. Supervisor Fennell, our regular chair, says, "I'm really sorry that I could not join you this evening for what would be my last meeting on the HCOG board. Unfortunately, I was double booked and could not make it work. I want to thank you all for the time we shared on this joint powers authority. The work is so important, and it is truly an honor to have been able to serve representing the county and chairing our body. It is wonderful to share the spirit of solution-oriented teamwork for the greater good, and I have very much enjoyed working with you all. Each of you represents your jurisdiction with courage and camaraderie and are to be admired for stepping up. A very special thank you to our staff. You are the ones who get the job done, and you are unfailingly professional and wonderful to work with. Thanks and congratulations to Director Marcella May. Having worked with you in this and other capacities through the years, I know your heart is in the work and for the good of Humboldt, and I wish you a very happy retirement. That's all for now. I wish you all the best in your work for our community, and I hope you can enjoy a safe and happy holiday season. Estelle Fennell, Supervisor, 2nd District." At this time, Christy, could we have a roll call?
Okay, Mayor Jones,
Here.
Mayor Seaman,
Here.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar,
Here.
Councilmember Smith, Councilmember West, Councilmember Johnson,
Here.
Councilmember Arroyo, Mr. Tucker.
Here.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, at this time, we will adjourn as the HCOG board and convene as the Policy Advisory Committee. And our first item of business is public participation. Is there any public comment to be had today? Hearing none.
No, there is no public comment.
Okay. Hearing none, we will move to approval of the meeting record. Has everyone had the opportunity to read the minutes?
I would make a motion that we approve the November 19th, 2020 minutes.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We have a roll call vote.
Okay. Mayor Jones,
Yes.
Mayor Seaman,
Yes.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar,
Aye.
Councilmember Smith, Councilmember Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Tucker.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
All right, thank you. And our next item is a presentation on the Eureka Broadway Multimodal Corridor Plan. And do we
I'll
have?
begin this.
Thank you.
So I want to welcome board members and our Policy Advisory Committee member who's here tonight, Kevin Tucker from Caltrans. I am Marcella May, the Executive Director until Christmas. This is going to be my last meeting, but I am very thankful that we have the draft ready for you tonight. You'll see a lot of the work that went into this planning project so far. And we just hope that we do get good public participation in this. We're not asking the board to approve or adopt anything tonight. It is just to get information, and we will have a reasonable amount of time for the public to contribute to get direction from this board before it comes back in a final document. I do want to acknowledge up front that there have been prior studies on the part of Broadway that we studied from Herrick to 4th Street. And I want to say that this planning project is different. We was funded through the strategic partnership program. And with the strategic part is learning from the past, what worked, what didn't work, what ideas were there, what the public supported, to meet criteria of transportation funding in the future. We want to be eligible when we're ready, and then to work together to find a solution. And the partnership part is not just the city, HCOG is the region, and Caltrans is the state, but public engagement is key, not only to transportation planning in general, but every transportation funding opportunity. Public engagement is very important in success in securing any funding. So this project began the planning process in June of 2019. And since that time, 3 people have died on the roadway. I think we had a 4th person that had a heart attack in a car, but the 3 were bicycle and pedestrians. The most important thing, I think I've said that before tonight though, is that this plan, whatever it ends up at the end, does not end up sitting on a shelf. We want to hear ideas, get your input, a thumbs up when something looks like you can support it or it looks like a good idea, and we want to hear about your concerns. With that, I'm going to introduce the team. The first person I'll ask to speak is Brad Medham. He's the Deputy Director for Planning and Local Assistance in our district, Caltrans District 1. After that, Jesse Willer, he's the City of Eureka City Engineer. And after that, Todd Tregenza, he works for our local consultant firm, GHD, and he has done an extraordinary job on this plan. So I just wanted to give him that little bit of kudos. And with that, Brad, I'm hoping you can say a few words.
I'd be happy to. Thank you, Marcella.
Thank you.
Marcella correctly categorized this as a partnership effort, and it truly has been. The studies that Caltrans has done have mainly looked at our existing right-of-way and haven't looked beyond that. Having the city and HCOG work on this one with us gave us an opportunity to perhaps stand back a little bit and look a little broader, and I think that's a really good idea. We've been part of it every step of the way, and look forward to hearing from you what you think we've done. So thank you.
Jesse Willer, you're next.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcella and Brad. Yeah, so tonight we want to present to you kind of the current status of the Broadway Corridor Multimodal Plan. Broadway, which is 101 through Eureka, as you're probably all aware, has been studied much in the past for a number of reasons. This plan sets out to draw from those previous efforts and advance the long-term planning for all modes of transportation. Safety continues to be a driving factor for change within the corridor. As a fact, there's been numerous collisions since the beginning of 2020 when we started this study, some resulting in fatalities. Unfortunately, these types of collisions are not uncommon within the corridor. While long-term planning is a critical component for meaningful change in bike and pedestrian safety, near-term solutions are also necessary to address significant safety concerns and cannot be ignored. The project team has been developing the plan, but also the long-term plan, but also working to identify effective near-term projects to address some of these safety concerns. Along with safety, other significant deficiencies are present in the corridor, including a lack of non-motorized transportation facilities, congestion, underutilized transit, and poor aesthetics, to name a few. Many of the potential solutions for these individual shortcomings can benefit each other, and are presented here tonight. There are certainly no easy answers for fixing Broadway. There will have to be compromise to bring any effective solution into reality. This compromise, however, does not include safety. The hope is that a robust analysis and community engagement completed so far and to finish out the report, including this meeting, that this plan will have the foundation for positive change within the corridor for now and for years to come. I thank you all for being here, and we really look forward to getting your support tonight, or your feedback tonight on the draft plan. Thank you.
Todd, you can take it away now.
Okay, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, not much left to say, guys. I think you all pretty much nailed it. No, I look forward to this presentation. I'm going to play with my screen space here a little bit so I can see everybody. Okay. So yeah, it's been a real pleasure getting to know everybody and working with this team. Marcella, Jesse, and the rest of the city staff, the folks at Caltrans. This has really been a team effort. Different elements of each group has come in and helped at various phases to move things along, including some short-term pressing safety improvement needs, funding sources, a variety of things I can get into as we move forward. On the consulting team, we also had partnership. We had RCAA, which is really integrated into the community and helped us with some of the on-the-ground outreach efforts that, unfortunately, with the global COVID pandemic ongoing, those kind of tapered off, and we had to move to a more digital online engagement platform. Nonetheless, we had the involvement and participation of various advisory groups within the city. And just overall, it's been really a great team effort, a comprehensive team for a comprehensive project. With that, I'd like to actually turn it over briefly to Mackenzie Clark, who has really been at my right hand for moving this project in through the last stretches, assembling the report, getting into the details of the analysis, and helping to come up with solutions that work for everybody. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mackenzie to go through the purpose and need, and then I'll come back and describe the alternatives analysis and some of the benefit that we anticipate with the project, the preferred plan as we propose it. Mackenzie, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Todd.
Okay.
So the project, as Marcella and Todd have alluded to, has been ongoing in the sense that the Broadway corridor has been studied for a long time, and there are some very obvious reasons for that. Of course, the travel demand for local and regional travel through US 101, and also it being a local main street, the need for safety improvements due to the obvious number of crashes that are witnessed on a monthly basis, lack of sufficient multimodal facilities to ensure consistent and reliable multimodal mobility, and other categories including access management, general community enhancement and economic enhancement, and then ultimately emergency preparedness and resiliency. So all of these were kind of the main reason that the Broadway corridor as a whole has been studied for over 50 years. So to highlight some of the primary corridor challenges, number one, and most alarmingly, is safety. The Broadway corridor itself has a statistically high crash rate, and not only for total crashes, but it's also statistically high for fatal and injury crashes. And we did analysis comparing to Caltrans statewide averages, and the corridor exceeds fatality rates by 6% to 2%, so 3 times as many fatalities for certain portions of the corridor compared to other similar facilities throughout the state. There's also travel time and delay issues affecting the corridor. Again, regional travel, traveling through Humboldt County, and then of course the local travel, people getting to and from work. And these unreliable conditions can create excessive delay, upwards of 12 minutes for certain directions in the PM peak hour, and that's only expected to increase in the future. And as I mentioned before, there are some multimodal facilities, so bicycle facilities and sidewalks, but they are disconnected and it creates high stress conditions for bicyclists and pedestrians. So as I mentioned, the crash issue along the corridor is obvious. It shows up in many newspapers and online news sites of trucks turning over or unfortunate bicyclist and pedestrian fatalities that Marcella referenced earlier as just occurring within the last 10 months. So to get into a little bit more specifics on the crash history, because this really played a big role in kind of framing the type of improvements that we ultimately recommended for the preferred concept. So Eureka as a city ranks #1 for total fatal and injury crashes for similarly sized cities throughout California, and also ranks #2 for those crashes involving pedestrians, and #3 for those involving a bicyclist. And well, that's the entire city. We also looked at what percentage of the crashes within the city occur on the corridor. And while only 16% of the total crashes within Eureka occur on Broadway, almost 50% of the fatal crashes occur on Broadway. So that plays into the statewide averages of the crash rates being much higher than the statewide averages. Another alarming statistic, oh, sorry, Todd.
Oh, hi.
Just to add, to this, almost 50% of the fatal and severe injury crashes occur under dark conditions with limited visibility, and over 50% of the total fatal and severe injury crashes involve a bicyclist or a pedestrian. You can go ahead now. The bicycle and pedestrian crashes were an alarming statistic that definitely influenced the type of recommendations that Todd will go into in future slides. But as I mentioned, over 50% of the total fatal and severe injury crashes involve a bicyclist and pedestrian, even though the total crashes only make up 12% of those along Broadway. And unfortunately, we looked back through 2009 to 2020, and while there might be some years with lower fatal and severe injury bike and ped crashes, the 5-year rolling average shows an upward trend in these unfortunate crashes.
All right. Thank you, Mackenzie. And Mackenzie will be available for any Q&A as well. And we have a lot of content. I want to be mindful of everyone's time. So I'm going to get through a lot. We can always come back. There's even some extra slides in the back that we pulled out because it was just too much. But I want to make sure I answer any of your questions that you may have about the project, process development, all of that. So as has been stated tonight, this is a corridor that's undergone study for quite some time. And so we did want to take a look back in the history books, so to speak, those more recent and even older, and make sure that we looked at all solutions that have been considered in the past. Many of the preceding alternatives were really more auto-centric, bypasses, widening of Broadway, and we did take a cursory look at those, but they've been dismissed for a reason. We looked at various couplet scenarios, some on local streets, then we kind of dove into our alternative development process around that stage, taking the things that seem to have some merit and some potential, and we boiled it down to 8, which is still a large number. We had to boil it down again to get into the full quantification of the benefits and the costs, but we started with 8 main alternatives, and these are all in our appendix in the alternative selection process. They were analyzed at a high level. We went from improving the existing alignment of Broadway, so staying within the right-of-way that we currently have. One of the things we wanted to be sure of is that our solution wouldn't have an adverse impact on the existing businesses along the corridor, particularly these days. When this project started, we weren't in the COVID situation, but particularly these days, we're sensitive to impacts to local businesses. We looked at some couplets, older couplet concepts, some controversial. Waterfront drive extensions along the waterfront was considered, later dismissed. We looked at different directional splits. We looked at road diets and maybe building new parallel facilities that could complement the north-south connection of Broadway. Because the problem we ultimately kept facing was there wasn't enough curb-to-curb width on the existing alignment, particularly north of Wabash, to get the types of multimodal facilities we know are necessary to make this a safe corridor for active transportation. The alternatives process involved lots of communication with the public and stakeholder groups. Again, a little bit hamstrung by the meeting restrictions, but all in all, I would say that the digital outreach was successful, and that's all documented in the report as well. We did have engagement, and we were successful in getting generating that back and forth with our stakeholder community and public at large. We looked at class 2 bike lanes, class 4 bikeways. These are bikeways that are separated by a vertical element. We looked at class 1 shared use paths, just highlighting some of the concepts we looked at from a bicycle perspective. From a pedestrian perspective, we looked at really shortening the crossings in between, minor streets. And then we also looked at transit amenities, and pedestrian connectivity goes hand in hand with improving access to transit. I'll get into some more of the features of our preferred concept as we keep going. Here's an illustration of the wide variety of concepts we looked at from a high level. What we did is, in assessing these, we applied what's known as the Smart Mobility Framework. And this is a framework developed by Caltrans, and it's part of their corridor planning guidelines. And we wanted to apply it, because it's a good framework. It has multi-criteria performance measures. We look at things like the environment, social impacts. We want to make sure that environmental justice is considered, health and safety, reducing crashes. We want to look at economic impacts. We want to look at congestion, mobility. So it provided a nice platform for the technical assessment. It also is important because it feeds into the performance criteria that are necessary to inform competitive grant applications. So we recognized early on that this project was going to result in an expensive project that will require outside funding. And so we wanted to make sure the way we assessed it was in line with the grant applications we would later pursue, namely solutions for congested corridor, or other grants for smaller projects, potentially active transportation program, highway safety improvement program. I'm gonna likely spare you all from the details of this, but all well documented in the report, which is online, as Marcella mentioned, with public review ongoing until mid-January. So looked at safety, multimodal. Deliverability is an interesting one. I haven't mentioned that yet, but how feasible is an alternative, and so how close is it to being able to be delivered as a project? That is something that the reviewers will look for on a grant application. Public input is still live. We had 2 community workshops. The first one in person back in November 2019. Feels like a long time ago, and I guess it was. Our second workshop in August was virtual, was well attended, and a success despite the virtual setting. And we had a number of focus group meetings, and these included our stakeholders that were really members of the bicycle advocacy groups and environmental stewards of the area. And we had a business community survey. So we wanted to make sure we tried to get every voice involved in this planning process. The draft remains online, so please, if you haven't looked at it, Eureka Broadway Corridor Plan.com should be front and center when you land on the page. Some examples of the public input we received. We did use an interactive map-based tool early on in the project to gain insight on where the public perception of issues were. We're able to then overlay that onto our data analysis and see if those match one-to-one. It tended to match pretty well. So this is a heat map going down Broadway of where the issues were perceived in the community. Some of the highlights from the business community survey, we got very positive feedback in terms of needing to improve the connections for those that are walking or biking, improve the desirability of the corridor in general, the desirability of using transit as a mode. And overall, everyone recognized there was an issue that needed to be solved, and we didn't encounter any roadblocks with the business community relative to the things we were proposing. So that was encouraging. So we eliminated a number of alternatives, as I mentioned earlier. Some of these were removed because they didn't achieve the goals of the grant application that was received to prepare this study to begin with. We also looked at general public opposition or support to the concepts we were proposing. Environmental concerns were front and center as well. So anything that involved new roadways that could have jeopardized the waterfront trail or encroached further, basically alignments right along the coast or inland that had massive environmental footprints, we dismissed as difficult to implement and not in line with our goals. Reduced segment capacity was also a reason to eliminate concepts. So a couple of the road diet alternatives I mentioned earlier, they were really nice in that they allowed you to get the multimodal and safety improvements on the corridor without building any new alignments or thinking outside of the current Broadway alignment. But ultimately, their impact on capacity was just made them non-starters. The corridor today does experience some congestion that will go up, as Mackenzie mentioned, and ultimately the grant program we're going after is the solutions for congested corridors. So while part of that tactic has to involve mode shift and VMT reduction, we also can't jam up a regional route and expect to receive funding to improve congested conditions. So those road diet alternatives were dismissed as they would have had a really bad impact on congestion, travel times, emissions, everything related to that. The three retained alternatives, one was improving the current Broadway alignment, so working around the edges of what we have, reducing lane widths as possible to get multimodal improvements where we can. And this works pretty well north of the mall. There's a decent width of roadway there. The right-of-way is wide, and we can get protected bikeways, which is what ultimately is in our preferred plan. We can get wider sidewalks. We can get narrower travel lanes. We can get lots of safety and multimodal improvements within that right-of-way. As you start going north, though, the right-of-way tightens. And that's where the Coster couplets and the double couplet concept, ultimately our preferred plan is the double couplet concept. That's where those come into play. The Coster couplet would function by building a new southbound only connection through what's known as the balloon track down the existing Coster alignment to rejoin just south of Wabash. And within the right-of-way that we gain by moving southbound traffic to a new facility, we gain at least 24 feet, plenty of room for safe, comfortable Class 4 bikeways for all ages and abilities to get out there onto the roadway and be able to navigate outside of a vehicle. Now, we're still constrained, however, between Wabash and the mall, and that's where the double couplet comes in. And this alignment is new. This is not something that I believe has been studied in the past. And we have some illustrations that show where we envision it sitting in a few slides. but it wraps around the existing developed areas just north of the mall to create another southbound only connection and free up right of way between Harris and through Vigo all the way up to Hawthorne. Free up right of way similar to the Coster area to allow safety improvements, transit improvements, bikeway improvements, and sidewalk without impacting congestion. At this point, I'm going to walk through the preferred concept, excuse me, and show some illustrations of what that looks like. So, as I said, the couplet alignments give us more right-of-way, and that's the number one thing that we were short of in this plan. We needed more right-of-way to get safe bikeways. It also allowed us to look at transit improvements, significant transit improvements. So as the city, HCOG, Caltrans, and HTA look to improve the efficiency, the reliability of transit, as the corridor continues to get more busy with vehicles, basically what we've done is we provide queue jump opportunities for the buses to get ahead of any queuing at a signal, and also allow them to run on the shoulder of the roadway to provide something akin to a bus rapid transit service, depending on how the stops are ultimately spaced. But highly improved reliability for the transit, improving the pedestrian crossings as well, both north-south and east-west. The ultimate plan gives us a comprehensive multimodal network. It connects to the waterfront trail in significant ways. Broadway is currently a barrier to this wonderful north-south trail facility that you have, and we've provided key areas along the corridor to better connect out to the trail, including to park and ride areas and other logical access points. So some highlights of the southern segment. This starts around Herrick Avenue up to Truesdale. Are the connection of a new Class 1 facility from the old Kmart access down to the park and ride at Herrick. This is an exciting project. It would provide a dedicated space along a section of Broadway that really feels and functions more like a freeway. So a safe connection to complete a loop around this corridor out to the Hickshire Trail. We look at raised medians, and those are not only great for beautification, introducing some landscaping opportunities for the city, also really controlling those access points so that we don't have a long sequence of full access driveways that can cause broadside collisions that have a bad outcome. So looking to control a little bit more where left turn access is provided. We also propose bulb outs at all the side streets. So wherever we have excess width, our plan proposes and recommends to tighten up the crossing distance wherever possible. That's reflected in our concept illustrations as well. Here are some more pictures of the southern segment, the entrance to Kmart. These are all conceptual. Future phases of the project will get into more design detail, but we do feel with relative confidence that these are implementable projects that can be built within the right-of-way that's available. I'll get into that a little bit. Some elements of that next step have already occurred. So we have class 4s, basically from the Kmart where the class 1 would rejoin the Broadway alignment all the way up through the southern segment, and in fact, all the way up into downtown. We also propose some new signalized or at least beacon crossings for pedestrians. Wherever you don't have a traffic signal, there aren't that many full access intersections. And so we recommend installing wherever there's any demand, evaluate the need for that crossing and implement it. And because of the speed of the traffic on the corridor, we really need at minimum a flashing beacon to alert motorists of an upcoming crossing, if not a pedestrian signal or a pedestrian hybrid beacon, they're also called. The middle segment, now this shows the couplet that I mentioned. And some interesting circulation notes to be aware of. Harris currently is one way, with Henderson, the complementary westbound movement, one way as well. And we would continue to recommend full access from any of these, of course, but they would now connect to a southern couplet. So we would be looking at new alignments to the southern couplet across Henderson and Harris. All of the signal timings will be improved with the couplet scenario, and that's an important thing to keep in mind. We'll be eliminating the need to wait for a southbound opposing left turn movement, if you can visualize that. So it frees up a lot of the signal cycle to hopefully move vehicles more efficiently through the corridor, while also providing comfortable and safe crossing times for pedestrians. There are a lot of landscaping opportunities up and down the corridor as well. Here's some more images from this portion of the corridor. These are also in the report, and so in the interest of time, I might be going a little bit faster, but can always come back as well. The northern segment now, from Hawthorne to 5th, this is the balloon track alignment. We provide a new Class 1 connection through the real southern end of the balloon track to the waterfront trail. We believe that will be really important in getting people from downtown out to the waterfront trail. Currently, that movement is a little bit challenging. And the couplet system will rejoin right around the Del Norte intersection today. We do recommend some restriction of directions at Del Norte. I'll show that in greater detail in a minute. Here it is. So at Del Norte, we see the two couplets either merge or diverge, depending on which direction you're going, with a nice median in between. Provides a good safe crossing here for pedestrians. This is the beginning of the more downtown feel of the corridor, and we designed the improvements to make it a walkable and safe, comfortable area, perhaps some plantings and places to gather that are out of the harm's way. Again, with the frequency of the pedestrian crossings increasing in our plan, we see vastly improved opportunities to safely cross Broadway, which has been one of the main factors contributing towards the collisions that are occurring, is that just large distances between crossings and lighting, as Mackenzie mentioned as well. Here's some images of the types of improvements we're recommending, real world pictures to give you a better sense of what some of these things may look like. Class 4 here with a bus alongside gives you a good sense of the type of concept we're thinking. Similarly, where possible, putting in some landscaped islands to help separate the cyclist from the motorway. And again, these improvements are only possible really with the couplet scenario. There just simply isn't the room today without moving vehicles to another alignment. If we were to try to get bikes on the northern sections with staying within the current alignment of Broadway, you would either have to get rid of all the left turns into and out of businesses, basically get rid of that center turn lane, or you would have to be relegated. And even in that case, probably you'd be relegated to a Class 2, which has no physical separation from the travel. And given the number of vehicles on the corridor, we don't believe that's the appropriate facility for Broadway. Here are some cross sections. This is a typical cross section for a large length of the corridor. We've got 11-foot travel lanes, which are slightly narrower than what's out there today, but still within acceptable design parameters. And a 12-foot bike lane, bus lane. This would be painted red in any conflict areas, similar to a bike lane where it's painted green. And the transit lanes would also be painted and designated in a way that motorists wouldn't occupy that space. In some cases, the bus queue jump area, which is this lane that they're going to position themselves in as they get to a signal, That may also be a shared right turn lane for the general traffic. Recognizing that right turn movements are much lower, you could have a right turning vehicle and also a bus occupy that space. They would still have an advantage over the through traffic in that situation. So now we get to some of the improvements, some of the data analysis that we did with and without project. The bicycle level of traffic stress, this is a measure of how comfortable it is on a scale of 1 to 4 to be a cyclist on Broadway or on the side streets. 4 LTS, the highest, the most stressful, really is a facility only the most enthusiastic, confident rider would feel comfortable navigating. A 1, on the other hand, is a facility you'd feel comfortable taking your kids on. All ages and abilities is kind of how we describe that. So you'll see that without any improvement, the current situation really presents a strong north-south barrier. And so not only is it difficult to get north-south unless you're on the waterfront trail, it's difficult to get across Broadway. And that situation is dramatically improved with the improvements we're recommending, with largely LTS1 facilities, which is, again, the most comfortable facility. Okay, now operations also improve significantly because of what I mentioned in terms of moving the southbound traffic. You can improve the efficiency of the traffic signals and how you can platoon vehicles through there. I'm going to focus on this bar chart on the right. This is your southbound PM peak hour, one of the more challenging times to get through the corridor today. So today we have a free flow speed. If there was nobody out there, what we measured people traveling at kind of the middle of the night using big data was traveling through the corridor about just under 4 minutes. When you add in delay and just regular congestion during the peak hour that you experience today on average, it adds another 7 minutes to that journey. So that's approximately 11-minute travel time today, all things considered. Then we also factor in this this number called buffer time, and buffer time is a bit of a concept to wrap your head around, but essentially that measures how much extra time you plan for on your trip. And so this is measured by looking at the travel time reliability, which is really a measure of how often does the corridor break down further. So while the travel time is an average measure for the year, the buffer time really essentially measures how often there's like a total shutdown of the corridor and how much extra time you would give yourself to make that journey on time, because you know there's a chance that the corridor will be more congested than average. The breakdowns could be caused by a variety of factors, but definitely one of the main ones is the frequency of fender benders, or worse, the frequency of collisions on the corridor causes oftentimes, we've seen that as we prepared the study, a shutdown of 1, 2, or all lanes on Broadway. So that is essentially a measure of that. In the future, with that, so we looked at year 2045, and what we found using the modeling, the forecasting, looking at some local growth and regional growth, that those numbers would go up significantly, and your congested travel time would go from 7 minutes to 12 minutes. Your buffer time would also increase proportionately because as you add more traffic, you add in the number of times there's going to be lane blockages. What was really an outstanding result in our modeling, frankly, an improvement beyond what I had originally expected, is that with the 2045 forecast demand, so the same amount of traffic as the no-build scenario, with our preferred concept, the couplet system, coordination of the signal timings up and down the corridor, we end up with a travel time that's actually lower than today. So that is a great result for our analysis. We're also forecasting a reduction in VMT, and that could come as a surprise, but what we've done by introducing all these robust active transportation facilities is we're able to actually estimate the mode shift, and we use this using data that's been collected, statistical elasticities associated with the type of improvement and the amount of people that live within various buffers of that improvement. It's a modest estimate of increased use. Increased use could, in fact, I would say typically it may even exceed what this estimate produces. But with that, we expect a 10% reduction in VMT. So a 10% shift in total demand for auto use on the corridor because of folks shifting to alternate means of travel. And I should say that also applies to transit. The transit mode shift is a more conservative estimate. We have less control over how the frequency of transit will increase and how those programmatic improvements will be implemented. So we take a more conservative approach with that, but that does include both bike mode shift and transit mode shift. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Jesse Willer with the city to discuss some of the environmental background conditions and considerations we took into this project.
All right, thank you, Todd. I'll give Todd a much deserved break here to catch his breath, and we'll step away for a moment from transportation planning and design and talk a little bit about some of the things that come along with doing a project, any sort of project. But in this case, we have a few items that are bulleted out here that are important to where our project is located and to what we're trying to accomplish, because they are things that are certainly considerations that need to be taken into. They're impacts. So really, the first one on the list, contamination. Most projects require screening for potential environmental contamination. In our case, the balloon track is one site that one of our alternatives, or a few of the alternatives, actually had cut across. The early alternatives and our preferred alternative does cut across, and it does have identified contamination on it. That contamination is identified in previous studies, including the Coster Couplet feasibility study by Caltrans, which is one of the kind of the foundations for this particular study for the north part of the corridor. The contamination here is present from the historic rail yard activities at the site. Future project phases after this study will have to identify further parcels potentially contaminated by or impacted by contamination. So we're not just looking at the balloon track, but any parcel that one of these alternatives would cross would have to be evaluated to see if it had contamination, if there's any sort of mitigation that would need to happen along with that. So the contamination will need to be addressed to some degree at any impacted site to allow for facilities to be located on that parcel. The city currently has a EPA community-wide brownfield assessment grant that will be looking at many of these sites to determine if they are eligible for the site assessment and then potentially for cleanup with grant funds. And that will happen after this project is complete, as this is just a planning project and the other project is totally separate, but will also kind of cross over in these parcels. So the next bullet is sea level rise. And that is important for our project, as this project is really near to the coast of Humboldt Bay. And so we looked at sea level rise. We did a sea level rise analysis to identify where vulnerabilities are. We started by looking at previous studies that had been done throughout Humboldt Bay. And those studies had done a pretty darn good job of identifying different levels of sea level rise based on projections into the future. Here in the photo, we see a portion of the study area near Palco Marsh. The different sea level rise events that we looked at were 2-year, 10-year, and 100-year inundation levels. We also looked at inundation pathways to try to understand how sea level rise will affect potential alternatives. As Todd mentioned earlier, that analysis allowed a comparative metric between alternatives to determine where one alternative may be more vulnerable than another, which assisted in ranking the alternatives from a sea level rise perspective. So when we went through and did all our alternative rankings, that was one of the metrics we looked at was, sea level rise and vulnerability. From that basis of evaluation, we started to think about adaptation strategies, and we didn't go into great detail about adaptation strategies, but it needed to be looked at in order to kind of have a complete picture. You can't have a facility that may have impacts or from sea level rise and not have ideas about how those might be adapted for, because if there's no adaptation strategy, then the project really wouldn't have good legs to stand on. So with a better idea of what those sea level rise levels look like, we were able to start looking at what might adaptation strategies be. As we continue to look further into adaptation strategies in future phases of project development, we will include, we start looking at existing city facilities or Caltrans or private infrastructure in the area, and look at how multi-benefits might begin to come from that analysis, and how a adaptation strategy might help not just one aspect, but many aspects of a project or of an area. Really, it comes kind of down to a geographic area. Every area is impacted by sea level rise a little bit different, but you need to look at adaptation strategies that fit that particular area. We started looking at this particular area as an example here in front of you, the Palco Marsh area, and we came up with an idea for a concept that would allow for not only some sea level rise adaptation with some retreat of city utilities that are in the area, but also the ability to create additional wetland areas in this area and connect what are now kind of segregated or separate restoration parcels where there's wetlands such as Palco Marsh and Mauer Marsh, and restoration areas that are associated with the Bayshore Mall, and bring those particular parcels and restoration areas together to create a larger, more contiguous restoration area. So that's the sort of thing that you start to look at here. Well, how can we have multi-benefits that would benefit the community, benefit the city, benefit Caltrans with potential, buffering for the facility, the 101 through Eureka, as well as potential offsets for any mitigation that would be caused by impacts to wetlands by the project. And those are the things we start to look at, and that's kind of where we ended. Like, here's a potential project that could really help the project move ahead in the future that would allow it to be viable going forward. So those are kind of the critical environmental constraints, and I'll turn it back to Todd. Thank you.
Thanks, Jesse. And I just did a time check, and I have been talking as long as it feels like I have. So I'm going to try to speed things up here. We're getting to some bottom line numbers, which is fantastic. Okay, so total, as I mentioned, we knew from the outset, expensive project. We did take into consideration some of that mitigation. We don't know with full certainty what we will find, what curveballs will be thrown. Project development takes time, and cost estimates do change, but we have conservative cost estimates. We do this on a frequent basis, so we have a good sense of what these things may cost. This does include also an estimate for some of the cleanup on that Jesse mentioned, potential cleanup on balloon track. But again, those numbers they're not quite firmed up yet. So we included big contingencies, but long and short of it is that we estimate about $155 million project for construction and all the soft costs associated with the project from top to bottom, downtown to Herrick. The most expensive of those is the middle section with the southern couplet, and second most expensive, perhaps unsurprisingly, is the Coster couplet, and then the least expensive is the southern improvements, which mostly stick to the existing footprint of Broadway at $18 million for that one. This is a long corridor. So how do we put this into perspective? Well, one of the things we do is we run a benefit cost analysis, essentially to demonstrate return on investment. Not only is benefit cost really important to inform the grant applications and basically pit this project against statewide other priorities, it also helps everybody, including you tonight, other decision makers, in understanding that there is a return on this investment, this sizable investment. So we went through all these different criteria, and I'm happy to get into any of these details. These are economic parameters that are published by Caltrans, in fact, for the purposes of demonstrating return on investment. And we look at, again, using that smart mobility framework, a variety of different angles. We look at safety benefit, bike mode shift benefit, and that's really a health benefit, a commuter benefit. The air quality benefits of bike mode are actually wrapped into the air quality benefit at the bottom. We look at those reduced congestion benefits, so the delay reduction, the buffer time reduction, essentially monetizing for the amount of people on the corridor on an annual basis, how much time is saved. We can put a dollar amount to that time. It's basically time that's not wasted in the car. So overall, we measured a benefit of $426.6 million. So clearly the benefit outweighs the cost. And that, again, is a number we're very happy with. It's a positive result for the corridor study, and it demonstrates positive return on investment. 2.75 is our benefit cost ratio. And that is a number we were excited to get at the end of the project. It's something that comes along a little bit later in the process. Once you've got the plan in place, you've received all the input, you've kind of gone through the alternatives, decided whether or not you can do one thing or another. You finally you push play, essentially. It's more complex than that, but you run your analysis, you get your numbers, and you hope for a good number. And in my mind, this was a good number to get. So aside from the long-term plan of obtaining grants and seeking funding, especially through that Solutions for Congested Corridor program, which is really the most appropriate program for a project of this magnitude, other things have started developing and are underway. This is an example here. So Caltrans worked with the city and HCOG, and we helped, but really this was a public agency-driven effort. Hats off to Caltrans for getting it in on time. There's some Complete Streets funding available through the SHOP program. And there was a deadline. It was a short deadline, but we were able to submit for that money the southern segment. And in fact, it went a little bit beyond the southern segment, which ends at Truesdale. But we were able to get that project submitted. And we submitted the project for Caltrans submitted the project for $13 million. This would provide the Class 4 bikeways and every element essentially of the project that we recommended in our preferred plan, including that Class 1 trail down to the Herrick Park and Ride. The nice thing about that is we also were able to generate support letters from a lot of the stakeholder groups. And so we're hoping to hear back good news on that soon, and we have a good feeling about it, but nothing final yet has been conveyed to us. Another thing that's underway, kind of as a result of this planning process and uncovering issues, and not that folks didn't know this was the case, but I think it motivated movement forward on a lot of things that have been maybe on the back burner. This is, again, city and Caltrans working hand in hand to look at a near-term safety action plan. What are some things? Okay, we've got the big long-term project, but people are literally dying on the corridor. There's a safety problem. It affects reliability of movement. What can we do today to make things better? And so we started looking at some of the pedestrian locations, also lighting. The city has completed a lighting evaluation to look at where some of the darker spots are on the corridor, what overhead lighting could be looked at, or pedestrian scale lighting as well, which is essentially the concept of lighting up the areas where the pedestrians congregate rather than the street itself. So these are all also underway. These would be funded through other programs, a variety of state and local sources, I'd imagine. And looking at the one that's illustrated right here, what are some of those crossing locations, and where are those consistent with the long-term vision? And in some cases, they're not. In some cases, these improvements would not be consistent with the long-term plan. But given how long that's going to take to implement, we're talking years for the long-term plan at to be friendly. These projects will provide a lot of benefit in the interim. So next steps for us, I do see something flashing on my screen in the chat. Next steps for us will be to receive public comment through January 13th. And then we will be back here for adoption of the plan. We're hoping late January, depending on what comments we receive on January 13th, we may be able to make that happen. At the latest, it would be early February. We're looking for an imminent update on the SHOP Complete Streets funding, and there is definitely motion on the near-term safety action plan, and I'm sure the city and Caltrans can provide some input if anybody has any questions on those. Beyond this planning study, so that wraps up the planning study in January, February. Looking at the next steps for the Caltrans process, the next big document is a project initiation document. That's what starts the program, the project as part of the actual state highway improvement process, essentially. And we're looking at Q1 2021 to start that PID, it's referred to. And that gets into more geometric detail of what turn pockets would look like, where the dimensions of the crossings, and it goes to a finer level of detail than what we were able to achieve in this planning effort. Environmental phase after that, and then the typical Caltrans project development process beyond that. The Solutions for Congested Corridor Program grant, I've mentioned that a couple times now. The next cycle will be due summer 2022. So it's definitely a date we're keeping an eye on. There's some phases we need to get underway before we can apply competitively for that program. And that's why we're really looking to maintain momentum and kickstart that PID process and the environmental phase. With that, with all of that, thank you all. And I'm here to answer any and all questions that you may have.
Does anybody have any questions to bring in? I think it's an awesome looking project, but I'll let other members make comment or questions. I hear none. I will say this much: in light of the governor's executive order last year, I think it was N1919, I think this project fits right into that. Brad may know more than I do, but I think this fits right into that. It's multimodal safety. It has the potential for transit priority. Should fit right into what he's looking for. I don't know if Brad has any thoughts on that.
Not on that specifically, but I do have an update on the SHOP Complete Streets application. The $13 million that Todd was talking about, that was approved by the Caltrans Executive Board this week. And so it's moving on to the CTC. It's actually the only single standalone project. All the others are parts of other projects. So that will be moving forward. I'm not sure if it'll be the January or the March, the CTC meeting, but it will be on their meeting for approval.
Good. Any other comments, questions?
Mike, if I may, I just want to thank Caltrans so much for applying for those funds. It was an excellent opportunity, and they stepped up. Alexis Kelso did, I think, most of the work. I'm not sure, but she did an awesome job. And it is one of the transportation projects where we got a multitude of support letters. So I'm just very happy to hear that news from Brad.
This is really, truly a collaborative project that's going to take everybody's participation, and it's awesome. It's going to be, as it moves along, it's not going to probably move very quickly, but incrementally you can see improvements probably every year. And I commend everybody as they work on this.
I have a question. It's a really specific one from early in the presentation. But the LTS score, which is the feeling of safety. Right now, we feel not safe at all, which makes perfect sense. Do you really think that this would make it 1, which is the lowest level? I mean, it seems like you're still on the highway. Like, we could really get it that low?
Yeah. So I can take that. We didn't assess the crossings, and so we just looked at the segments. And it doesn't mean the crossings will be bad, though, by any means. But the segments themselves, because they're physically separated from the roadway, kind of like a trail. I know it's closer, but you're still physically separated. Those would be scored at 1, and that's just the criteria we use. It's the Mineta Institute that developed the assessment framework, and it would be a facility you feel comfortable on. The crossings, if I were to guess, would probably be a little bit closer to a 2 on some of the bigger intersections, because you're still going to have some distance to cross, right? It's still going to be some level of exposure, but it won't be like today. There'll be bulb outs where possible. There'll be, I didn't even talk about other amenities to the traffic signals, but leading pedestrian and bicycle intervals, those essentially give the pedestrian or the cyclist a head start. So they get the green walking sign before the motorists do, and it gets them out into the travel way. So I do feel confident that the segments will be comfortable for all, and we would make sure those designs are as aggressively comfortable as possible for the crossings.
Yeah, I would just like to add that the separation will be some kind of a beautification element to it. If it's trees or planters or something like that, that gives the bicyclist a lot more security than with just green paint on the roadway.
It's a nice thing to think about, going from that, just nerve-wracking white knuckle experience to like, it's all cool now. I mean, it's a big project. It's not like it's going to happen overnight, but it's just kind of mind-boggling to think of that. Also, thank you for bringing and incorporating the kind of near-term ideas that we're talking about that will happen before the bulk of this work gets started, recognizing that this is a long-term project and we need some short-term solutions that are outside of that. So I appreciate it. Thanks.
Any other comments, questions? Well, anything wrap up, Marcella, or?
I do have public comment.
Thank you, Debbie.
Okay. Yes, I do. I did receive a public comment that was submitted by Colin Fisk, the Executive Director of Coalition of Responsible Transportation Priorities. So I will read his comment. As a stakeholder in the Broadway Multimodal Corridor Plan, CRTP anticipates providing more detailed comments on the draft plan and its identified preferred concept in the future. However, at this time, we wish to direct your attention to the comments we have already submitted with our allies at EPIC, the Humboldt Baykeeper, and the North Coast Environmental Center. You can find these letters dated November 3rd, August 7th, and March 24th of 2020 on our website, transportationpriorities.org, on the reports and analysis page. To briefly summarize those letters, the preferred concept requires the destruction of coastal wetlands as well as construction on highly contaminated soils, both of which likely mean that it will take many years to complete such a project, if it can be completed at all. We can't afford to wait that long to address the safety crisis on Broadway. The draft plan itself recognizes this problem, and in addition, the preferred concept includes many, although not all, of the near-term safety improvements we have recommended. Therefore, we urge HCOG, Caltrans, and the City of Eureka to put all of their immediate efforts and funding toward near-term pedestrian and bicycle safety improvements, rather than toward pursuing the plan's preferred concept at this time. That concludes Colin's comments.
Thank you, Debbie.
We also have a caller online. I'll go ahead and let them in.
Thank you.
And the last numbers are 3678. You can go ahead, please.
You can go ahead, caller.
Hello. I need to get away from my computer so that there's not feedback, I think. Hi, my name's Jennifer Kalt. I'm the director of Humboldt Baykeeper. And thanks for the great news from Caltrans that the SHOP grant proposal is moving forward. That's excellent. We strongly support that project to address safety concerns on Broadway. As far as the plan that was just presented, we have been a stakeholder along with many other stakeholders engaged in the process since June 2019, and we strongly oppose the preferred alternative as it is presented. I think if you look at your report, you will also see the business community, more than half of the business community also opposes the preferred alternative. The environmental constraints of this alternative are the same as they were back in 2004 when the CTC denied funding for a very similar project. It was just a little to the west, closer to the bay, but it's still what is being proposed today is still on coastal wetlands and is basically a non-starter as far as we're concerned, and we'll continue to oppose it. What we do agree on is the urgent need to make Broadway safe for pedestrians and bicyclists, not in 10 or 20 years, but in 2021. So we, along with CRTP and EPIC and the North Coast Environmental Center, strongly urge HCOG, Caltrans, and the City of Eureka to put all of your resources into immediate fixes on the existing Broadway corridor, not on this long-term fantasy that will not garner public support. Thank you.
That concludes public comment for this item.
Okay. If no other board members or staff wish to make a comment, we thank the presenters and we look forward to studying the online, the full presentation. And with that, we'll move on to the consent calendar. Does anybody have any items on that that they'd like to pull? If not, we'll take a motion to approve.
I would move we accept the consent calendar and pass those items.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second.
Okay, I'll do a roll call. Mayor Jones,
Yes.
Mayor Seaman,
Aye.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar,
Aye.
Councilmember Smith,
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Tucker.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
All right, thank you. And we move to discussion items. We have a couple of those. The first one being a progress update on the Regional Early Action Planning Grant and Program. We have a presenter for that, Una or Marcella?
Yes, that is me. Thank you very much. Hello, board members, and welcome, Councilmember Atkins Salazar. I'm Una Smith, the Senior Regional Planner for HCOG, and in fact, this particular program is brand new to HCOG and actually changed my role from senior planner to senior regional planner. So last month, I gave an introduction to the board on this money coming to us through the COG, and it is a total of $785,186. So this is just an update to let you know what happened in the last month, because this is a very speedy project with a full application due at the end of January. So since I spoke to you all last, I did have another roundtable meeting with all of the planners, or all the planners are invited, and CSDs were invited again, and some interested practitioners. And on that call was also Housing and Community Development, who administers this grant, and the technical assistance team that won the contract statewide for giving technical assistance in this program through 2023. And in that call, notable, the big cities and the county were there. So City of Fortuna, City of Arcata, City of Eureka, and the county, which if we were to take the RENA allocation, just hypothetically, as the cue for sub-allocating the money, the overwhelming majority of money would go to those entities because they have the highest RENA numbers. That being so, still the consensus in that meeting was that those present voted to not sub-allocate the money, as I noted in your staff report, and they think that the REAP funds will just serve the region better if we don't split them up. What they find to be the greatest need for streamlining housing right now is to get a regional plan for VMT analysis and modeling. And then the technical assistance professionals advised that to do that, it is HCD might want to see that in a climate action plan rather than standalone VMT. So that's something I have to research, but I'm going forward in trying to see if we would get approved. And then I'll bring that to the board in the full application to see if the board would approve that. And I'll take any of your comments here, of course. So again, we have over $700,000. So even with that regional plan, we would have a chunk of money available to also put towards temporary staff and consultants to basically be loaners free of charge to the smaller jurisdictions who don't have capacity to do what they want to do in their planning arena for accelerating housing. So those are the two broad categories of where right now, with public and stakeholder outreach that I've done, that is where the money would be geared towards in our application. And then I am going to be presenting to the Arcata City Council. The staff report said December 16th, but I was rescheduled to present to them January 6th, and I will be presenting to the City of Eureka on January 5th. And that's it for the progress report. If you have any questions, please let me know. Back to the chair.
Are there any questions on this item? I think it's, again, an opportunity. It's interesting that they all got together and had a consensus on how the funding could be used. And we did discuss earlier a regional approach to things so that you don't have a large disparity in the processes from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So it's looks like they're working together already. So with that, if there are no questions or comments, did I see Susan raising her hand? Nope. Okay, well, thank you, Una, and I appreciate your hard work on this. And moving right along to the, and I have a feeling we'll see her here, the Regional Transportation Plan update, adding language on equity and racial justice to the draft update. Again, thank you.
Thank you. So this is something I prepared earlier in the year in response to the other statements coming out from other organizations at the local, regional, state, and national level. And I give you examples in the staff report of the kinds of statements that were coming out from agencies that do things that we're interested in. So basically transportation and city planning and joint powers authorities. And then I drafted up the administrative draft before you. This went to the executive committee, as your staff report states, that the message I got from that was that the executive committee felt that the regional transportation plan was a good place for the contents of the draft to be in, and definitely with the policies that I drafted, borrowed from many places and drafted, the RTP would be the place for those policies, barring the board directing us to do a whole separate individual standalone plan. There's also the opportunity, of course, to make a statement on equity before December 2021, because the board will not be considering adopting the RTP until 1 year from now. And I really am looking from the board today and in the future to read the policies that are in there, because many of them are, as they're written right now, actionable, whereas others are a little more broad. But I have to know if any of those are things that you would object to having go out to public draft. So I would want to make sure to have that discussion here and take out anything you don't want and add anything you would want. So right now what you're looking at is the draft that will go out for public review in the future. So it's kind of a lengthy draft, so I don't want to belabor it by going through paragraph by paragraph. But as questions come up, if you want me to pull it up on a share screen, I can do that.
It was a lot of reading. I will grant you that. Do we have any comment from the board?
I'm in favor of including this in some form. I like referencing some of the issues that have come before our country as we've seen this last few years, and I'm in favor of including some equity language. So I'm strongly in favor of this inclusion.
I agree. I also am in favor of it, and so much of our transportation safety has a lot of those equity issues tied into it. So I think that there is a real direct link between equity and transportation safety for sure, and infrastructure. So I agree as well.
Thank you, Mayor Seaman and Mayor Jones. And this also reflects back probably onto the previous presentation and the comments made regarding safety and crossing the street and such. So any other comments? I believe we had a public comment to read into the record on this item, Debbie.
We do. This public comment also comes from Colin Fisk, the Executive Director of Coalition of Responsible Transportation Priorities. CRTP fully supports the efforts to incorporate strong and meaningful equity language into the Regional Transportation Plan update. Existing transportation systems both create and perpetuate social, economic, and environmental inequities, and it is incumbent upon transportation agencies to tackle these issues directly. We encourage the board to seriously consider the proposed policies and actions in the provided administrative draft and to direct staff to further develop and refine proposals for inclusion in the RTP. That concludes Colin's comments.
Thank you. And if there's no further questions or comments on this item, I believe that this was just to make a recommendation to proceed with a draft. Is that correct, Una?
Yes, that's correct. Today is a discussion item. I wanted to make sure there were no red flags. So I will proceed as with the way I'm going if there are no further comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Kevin Tucker from Caltrans. I just wanted to make a quick comment about one of the attachments is the equity statement from Caltrans, and I just thought it was worth mentioning that Caltrans has a lot of focus now on equity, and we've had a series of internal conversations within the Caltrans organization of 20,000 employees, and it's been enlightening to hear some of the different perspectives of people who have been impacted by transportation. And so I encourage HCOG and other agencies to consider having conversations about equity and how what we do in terms of transportation improvements and investments, how that impacts different communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think we've given direction to proceed, and we thank you for that, your work on this so far.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And with that, we'll take a motion to reconvene as the HCOG board and to approve the PAC recommendations.
I'll move to reconvene as a HCOG board and pass the recommendations.
I'll second it.
Okay. Christy?
Okay, Mayor Jones,
Yes.
Mayor Seaman,
Yes.
Councilmember Atkins Salazar.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith. Councilmember Johnson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you. And at this time, our next item is a resolution recognizing Marcella May and her retirement.
They snuck that on, Debbie.
We did sneak it on. So as you all know, this is Marcella's last meeting, and she has been with HCOG since for 11 years. And personally, I just want to thank Marcella for her dedication, for her encouragement, her patience, and her inspiration. And definitely thank you for all of the laughs that we've had in the 11 years that you've been here. And I wish you a future full of lots of wonderful retirement years with your husband and your dog.
Thank you.
If anybody else want to, I know that my time spent with HCOG, both on TAC and now on the board, and seeing people throughout the years I had a lot to learn, and thankfully you kind of helped guide the processes through and things, and watching and listening and learning. And I appreciate your hard work and all the things that you've done. You seem to put a lot of miles on vehicles, I bet, because if you're not in Sacramento, you're in Hoopa or Willow Creek or someplace. And I just thank you for your dedication and your service and the accomplishments that have been come through. The things that have not just time spent, but you can look back and you have something to show for it. And I appreciate what you've done. Thank you.
Thank you.
And anybody else? If not, I have something I'd like to read here.
I'll just say Mike, because I did not say goodbye last time because I said I was going to hold on until it was truly your last meeting, which it is. It came so quickly for us and probably took so long for you. But I haven't been here that long, but I've really appreciated having you at the helm and knowing that you're available. Your phone call away. I appreciate that I still have your personal phone number so I can ask you questions. Yeah, I just feel like this is a really, especially for Stacy, who's coming in right now and says, that there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn. I still feel like I'm trying to get it all. And Marcella has just been fabulous to call, and I am sure Beth will be just as fabulous to call. She's going to be leaving them in good condition so that she can do that. So thank you so much, Marcella. You have been just a complete joy to work with.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I'll take the opportunity. Marcella is too humble to let us even throw her a Zoom party. So I can attest there is a lot to learn, and Marcella just learned so much in all the years and really dove in and became quite an expert, and her capacity for remembering things is amazing. Debbie and I often just shake our heads like, how does she remember all that stuff? And it's really benefited organizations outside of ours. I know she's done a lot to help the Rural Counties Task Force and the Super Region, and she's respected far and wide. And I'm so happy for you for being able to retire early and when you're just a young whippersnapper. So looking forward to taking bike rides and bumping into you in Eureka when that's appropriate. So congratulations.
Thank you. I thought I was losing my memory. That was part of the reason I was retiring. So that was
Just wanted to say congratulations from District 1. I've worked on a lot of projects with Marcella and some really challenging projects, and more recently with the projects in the corridor, Eureka Arcata corridor. And just wanted to say thank you for your contributions to the region, and good luck with your retirement.
I just hope she leaves the binder full of the cheat sheets in it for Beth. So
I'm working on that.
yeah, I had a feeling you would be.
Yeah. But I will say, Beth, it's I am grateful for all my time. I have learned a lot, and it's the challenges are rewarding. But Beth will bring a new energy and just improve HCOG all the better. So I'm really excited for the organization as well.
It's bittersweet. We'll miss you, but we're looking forward to a new person, vision, whatever you want to call it, as you call it, a new energy, I guess is the best way to put it, as you said. So, but with that, I'd like to read something here. That's
excuse me, Councilmember Johnson, we do have somebody online for public comment.
Well, please go ahead.
Thank you. And the last numbers are 3678. You can go ahead, please.
Hi, this is Jennifer Cott with Humboldt Baykeeper again, and I too want to just say thank you, Marcella, for all the years that you've put into making Humboldt County a better place and all the hard work. And I know there's been a lot of frustrations over the years, but you deserve an early retirement while you can still enjoy it. And I will always think of your legacy of the Humboldt Bay Trail, because that has been something that so many people here have worked towards for decades. And so I hope I'll see you out there when the groundbreaking for the last 4 miles happens, hopefully next year, and we can ride our bikes together out there on the beautiful Bay Trail. So happy retirement to you.
Thank you, Jen. And it was great being a part of that. The Bay Trail took a lot of people. And just like HCOG, the staff here, Una, Debbie, and Christy are awesome. So I think that they're part of the success, a big part of it. And I want to thank them too.
Mayor Jones?
Well, I said last time how years ago when I was first on HCOG, it was Spencer Clifton. I worked with Spencer, and then I took my time off from public service. And when I got back on the council and became mayor and started coming to HCOG, I met a new person, Marcella, and I was so impressed right from the get-go. You have put in so much work. This is a hard job. I'm really impressed because all of the money that's involved, I remember years ago when I first got started at HCOG, I thought, well, we're talking about thousands. No, we're talking about millions of dollars. So it's quite a responsibility. And so happy retirement from me as well.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, I'd like to read this. A resolution of the Humboldt County Association of Government Board of Directors recognizing Marcella May on her retirement. Whereas on June 2009, Marcella May began her career as a part-time planner for the Humboldt County Association of Governments. And whereas in April 2010, Marcella filled the position as HCOG's interim executive director, where she ultimately promoted to serve as HCOG's executive director in December 2010. And whereas Marcella was actively involved with the Rural Counties Task Force, participated on the North Coast Tribal Transportation Commission to work together in government-to-government partnership to identify transportation issues. She shared information about transportation programs and counsel on the unmet transit needs process by continually improving transit performance to ensure community involvement in public transportation planning. And whereas Marcella actively participated in the State Highway 101 Eureka Arcata Corridor Improvement Project to identify safety and transportation needs to promote safe and efficient transportation. And whereas Marcella has worked with the California Highway Patrol and the City of Eureka Police Department, promoting supplemental patrols in outlying areas of the county and through the Arcata Eureka Safety Corridor, paid through funding with the Safe Authority for Freeway Emergency Program. And whereas Marcella worked on improving the unmet transit needs process by working with local transit agencies and attending city council meetings, continually improving transit performance to ensure community involvement in public transit planning. And whereas Marcella has assisted local transit agencies with applying for federal transportation assistance grant opportunities to create and enhance the region's public and paratransit transportation systems. And whereas Marcella has effectively been part of all HCOG committees to provide assistance and support in carrying out their regional duties and responsibilities. And now therefore be it resolved that the Humboldt County Association of Governments Board of Directors and citizens of Humboldt County hereby commend and thank Marcella May for her 11 years of service, and together wish her a long and a prosperous retirement. Dated December 17th, 2020. Thank you, Marcella.
Thank you, everyone. I already said my say. So, thank you. It's been an honor to serve. And I do look forward to sleeping through the night, not getting to Alzheimer's, get the plaque cleaned up.
Well, I wish you a happy retirement.
Thank you.
So do all of us. So, thank you. And with that, we come to PAC member reports. First being the Caltrans report on the 101 corridor project.
All right, so the corridor project, as mentioned at the last board meeting, is in the final design stage. The delivery date has changed slightly from January 15th to February 19th. This adjustment was needed to ensure that proper internal reviews are completed for the plan specification and estimates package prior to finalizing. It's a big project, and just got to make sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. That's the update for the corridor.
Okay. How about on the last chance grade project? Another fun one.
So last chance grade, the geotechnical drilling, which is in what is called the 2B phase, which includes helicopters flying in the drilling equipment. So all of those sites requiring the helicopter have been completed prior to all the big storms that have been coming in, which is good. And right now they're holding the first rounds of meetings with the different working groups to make decisions on the number of alternatives, which working towards the spring of 2021 to start the bulk of the environmental studies for the different alternatives. So it's reducing the number of alternatives will save time and money, and reduce the risk of any delays to the current schedule, and hopefully accelerate the current schedule. That's my update.
Okay. Marcella, as your last report.
Yeah, so I got the report from the Eureka Police Department. For the month of November, there were 133 stops, resulting in 63 citations, 70 warnings, and 2 arrests. Although the list provided to me by Sergeant Whitmer had more arrests than 2, so I'm not sure if this is more than one person. There was an arrest involving a stolen vehicle. There was an arrest for warrants for burglary, terrorist threats, violation of a domestic violence restraining order, 3 arrests for people driving with suspended licenses, and 2 arrests for people driving without a license or an expired license. So things continue between Eureka and Arcata for some reason.
It's got to be in the water.
I'm not sure.
Is there anything? Mayor Seaman.
Before we go, I just want to tell everybody that I asked the Eureka City Council at the last meeting to declare a traffic safety crisis based on the number of incidents that have been happening. I want to look at it as a larger than Eureka issue, though. And since that day, there was an accident on the day of the meeting, a fatality on 299, and then there was another fatality this morning on Myrtle, which I think was probably outside of city limits. So city council agreed, and we'll be making a proclamation declaring a traffic safety crisis, and I'll be putting together a task force to develop a countywide informational campaign. And I will fill you all in as it goes. And I will be reaching out to several organizations to participate, including Caltrans and CHP and Sheriff's Department and county, stuff like that. But I thought y'all should know.
Yes.
HCOG will participate as well.
Who?
HCOG.
Oh, of course. HCOG was a given. Sorry.
I was
Thank you.
thinking about fire departments as well. You know, they're always called out to emergencies, so maybe there could be some someone from the fire departments. I know our fire department goes up to the 299 crash. It's a lot. It really affects us. Yeah.
If you feel like there are people, and then a lot of it will be about education and messaging, less about engineering, because it'll be a short 6-month program and you can't do a whole lot of engineering changes in 6 months. So anybody that you think I should know about or should engage, please reach out to me and let me know. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for doing that, because it will benefit all of us.
We got to do something. It's just really crazy right now. So
I remember when it was H&I Street, and now it's every city seems to have had one in all regions of cities. So thank you. Any other before we adjourn? Well, with that, we will adjourn. And thank you all for your help, your participation. It's a collaborative effort, and we're all working for the good of our county and the jurisdictions we all represent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy holidays, everybody.
Happy Merry
Yes.
Christmas.
Happy retirement, Marcella.